So in this video, we're going to get some testing going in our continuous integration workflow, and we're going to do that through Jest. Now, if you're not already familiar with Jest, what we're going to be doing today is pretty simple, so you can just follow along. It's just going to be writing a test for the code that we had in the previous video. But if you want to know a little bit more about Jest and get familiar with some of the basics and stuff, I have a few videos on that I'll link in the notification here. But now that we've already set up our first GitHub action, this is going to be pretty straightforward, so let's just get into it. The first thing we're going to want to do is probably pop over to our terminal here, and I'll clear that real quick. And I'm going to do npm I for install, and let's do -d jest. So pretty straightforward. We'll add that package. Then what we'll want to do is come back over to our code. And in here, we want to go to our package.json. And we already had this test script. And I'm going to change that, and I'm going to make it just run Jest simply. Now this code is going to be in a new repo, because I figured it would be a little bit easier to follow along in the videos if, they all ended at the point where you are currently in the video, but it is using the same code as from the previous videos and repo. So I'll have that link in the description. I thought about doing it with branches and some other alternative ways and wasn't really happy with anything, so we're just gonna go with this and see how it goes. So let's quickly pop over to our terminal and do npm t, which is a shorthand for npm run test, if you don't know. You can also just do npm test as well. And you'll see that the output that we get here says no tests found exiting with code 1. And we had already talked about those error codes previously, where a non-zero exit code basically means a failure. So let's set up a test real quick, shall we? So we'll come back over to here, and we have this attack function that's going off here because of formatting. So it's pretty straightforward. And so what we'll do is we'll just make a new file, and then we'll do attack.test.js. We'll just do this all in the same root directory for now. So then we'll do const attack. We'll pull it in here. So we'll just make that a require statement. So we're just using common.js right now. And we're going to pull that in from right here, which is the attack file. Then we'll just write a test here. Oops. Should return damage sentence when called correctly. Okay, and then in this test block right here, we will get the result by calling it. I just like to make variables to keep it clear. So we'll call attack, and we're gonna pass attack smelly ogre as the creature. That's the first thing that it takes. You can see the hinting popping up here telling us the first thing's creature name, and then we want the damage. So we'll just put damage, and we won't do critical. We're just gonna do pretty simple. Now, the most straightforward way to do this would just be like write an expect statement, and then we'll say expect the result, and we'll say to be, and that will compare it. And in this case, we could say, what is the result? Well, we could run the code and see what the output is. I happen to know that it's going to be smelly ogre dealt 23 damage. I had to write that down so I could remember. And let's see how that test runs. And then maybe we'll improve it after that. So test ran once and it ran correctly. So let's see, let's make it fail, of course, to make sure that we're good. And you can see that it gives us a nice little output there to say, this isn't exactly what I expected. Okay, so that way is not super great. I don't want to spend a ton of time here talking about tests since we're here for CI, but let's do just a quick little improvement on this. The reason why I don't think it's great is because you have to know the exact sentence there. And it's okay in this case, but if it were to get longer and have a bunch of different variables, it's kind of annoying to keep updating that. So what you could do is you could do to match. And to match is a way to use a regular expression to match like a string. So let's say we'll do it to where it starts with smelly. We'll do the whole thing like ogre. And then we'll say it's going to be any number of characters here. And then it's going to have the number 23. And there's a lot of different ways you could do this, of course. I'm just trying to make sure that it has my two inputs here and that it ends up printing those out. So I don't really care what the rest of the sentence is. So we'll make sure that that test runs by coming back to the terminal, running this again. And we can see that it runs. And of course, if we wanted to, make sure that that would work, there you go. The thing I don't like about this version is you can see the expected pattern is what you get. It's not quite as clear as this, where it really highlights the difference. So there's some pros and cons to that. And finally, one last thing that's kind of fun that you can do here is because it's such a simple sentence, this to me is a really good situation for a to match inline snapshot. So if you do this, what's interesting about that is then when you'll see that there's nothing there, but when I go and I run the test here, oh, we didn't change that last one. Let's make that pass, sorry. Go back, run the test, and you can see it says snapshot written. And what's cool about that is it'll actually print that out if you didn't know that about Jest. So there's an inline snapshot thing. And what's really neat about this, so let's say that we can get rid of one of these. We'll just say to match, and then we'll do that. We'll leave two of them, really for no reason. You might just leave this one. But what's cool about this is, let's say we went and we changed the code here to dealt a whopping, I don't know what I'm doing. And then we test that. It'll actually print out this, we kind of get a nice little bit of best of both worlds almost, where we get a nice message between here showing us, oh, you know, this is actually what you received. And so that's really nice to catch it really quickly. And then if we wanted to update that, we could just update the snapshot and it will automatically update right here in our code. So that's as long as I'm going to spend talking about Jest in this one, but I think that's kind of a nice little use of inline snapshot. There's a bunch of disclaimers I could throw in there, but since we're here for CI, let's get on to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to revert this code right here for attack, make sure our tests are good, and npm t again, and it's lovely. Okay, now we want to add our GitHub action. So what we will want to do is go into our CI YAML, and in this instance, we can actually just add on another step. It's quite simple. So you don't have to put a name here, but I'm going to, and I like to just name it, you know, run tests or something simple. And then here I'll do run npm, and now we could just do npm t, and that's fine. So we could just have it run our test command, right? But what I like to do is, a lot of times when I'm writing tests, I'm going to want that short little npm t command to do watch mode for me, because that's what I use the most. So I'm going to pass this -- watch flag. And when I do that, you know, you can see that it's in watch mode right now. And then when I change the code really quickly, go back over to here and attack test, and I change, you know, I delete one of these or something like that, and I alt tab. Oh, why didn't that break? Oh, well, of course that satisfies it. Yeah, and then it'll automatically update, right? So that's a nice workflow that if anyone's, you know, used to testing, you kind of expect, especially with Jest. So we don't want that, you know, to be our watch command, right? When we run it in the GitHub Actions or whatever our continuous integration setup is. So what I'll do is I'll make a special command here called CI tests or test. We'll name it test. And then I'll add that here. Let's do CI test. And that will just run Jest. Now there's one more thing we actually want to add here though, is that Jest also has a --CI flag, kind of like the npm CI thing. So let's take a look at you know, what that means real quick so that we know what we're doing here. Hopefully that's big enough for you. So CI, when this option is provided, Jest will assume it is running in a CI environment, which it will be. This changes the behavior when a new snapshot is encountered. So instead of the regular behavior of storing a new snapshot automatically, it will fail the test and require Jest to be run with --update snapshot. So it seems like if you're not using snapshots, you don't really need it, but you might as well throw it on there, right? So jumping back over to here in our code, we now have a CI:test running Jest --CI, and then we have this right here where we do npm run CI test. Okay, so because I am a consistency nut, you know, I would also like this run lint here to also be kind of the same thing so that I know all my things are CI commands. So if I come back over to here where I have this lint command, whoops, I don't want to run that. I'll just do CI lint. And then what I'll do for now, because I don't have a different one, I'll actually just add a lint command. And even if they're duplicates, to me, that's fine. You could also point one to the other. It doesn't really matter, but a lot of times I'll end up customizing this later to do some extra stuff locally. So, you know, I like to just have it that way personally. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. If you don't like the duplicates and you just want to stick to one naming convention, of course, it's your choice to make. So back in the YAML, we'll speed this along here, npm run CI lint. And I also should mention really briefly that the colon in between does have certain use cases, but for the most part, it's just kind of a naming convention. You could name it kind of whatever you want. You could do CI dash or -lint, whatever you want. All right, so let's actually commit all this stuff up. So we added this test. we installed Jest here, so we can skip the package JSON lock, and then we updated our scripts. And then finally, in the YAML here, we added this run command and made a minor change to the name. So let's do add Jest and CI for it. I'm going to push that up now, and then we'll kick back over to our browser. And here we should see some actions. So these actions have started, and then we go to this Lint code base. Ooh. Oh, did I name the whole thing Lint code base? Let me check actually. I did, so I need to fix that name. So it's our normal installing packages here. Then it's going to run to ESLint as normal. You can see it had an error code and it just stopped right there. So what did we do wrong here? Oh, you know what it is? It's because when I wrote that, I didn't enable my extension. Haha. On new repos. So I will enable that in this workspace and disable prettier for now. Sorry about that, but it's good to see at least this one little thing. So normally I would probably cut that out to save some time, but in this case, I'll leave it in. And that's because here, I think it's a good example to show that, when this one fails, it's not even going to continue to run tests, right? So you get to see that in action. So all you have to do is do that. And then, of course, this is a pretty good example for me where we can already start utilizing that addition that we made. If we go to package.json, I can set my lint to do the -- fix command because I just always want to run that personally. So close that down, and then we'll do npm run just lint. And it looked like it tried to define as much as it can, but it also, or tried to fix as much as it can, but it also still has these problems where test and expect aren't defined. So let's show that real quick. So in this situation, we should now see here our VS Code actually showing us the errors now that I have my local extension running. And what we can do to fix that is all you have to do is go into your ESLint RC, and in your environment, you can do Jest true. And that will give you, that'll say, hey, I'm running in an environment that has Jest. So these globals are going to be available to me. So now when I run lint again, we only get this one warning, and that's that console log statement. I'm just going to leave that for now. That won't fail us. Let's go back up. Ran linting on new test. We actually added stuff too, but this is just for demo purposes and not to be crazy about our commits. All right, now that should have kicked off another action as soon as we push that up. And I have one more thing to fix, which is this lint code base. So while it's running that, I'll fix that. Boom, boom, boom. This is just the normal song and dance here. You just kind of grow your project as you go. In this case, our job is called ESLint, and it really shouldn't be. So what should we call it? I'm just going to name it like standard checks or something like that. I could name it like lint and test, but obviously that's going to grow. And we can really think of a name later on as we start to build up our suite. Here, this name actually matters because this is what's going to be displayed. So for now, we'll just name this lint and test. Make that change. Update CI job name. Now you may be wondering at this point, under this jobs flag, wouldn't you want to put this in another job? Or you may be wondering about multiple jobs, and I am going to touch on that. But first, let's get this running. Finish this up. So this is our one that already ran. That was before I made that one change, and you can see that it all passed. So just to take a dive into that, you can click in here and see that ESLint, ran with no problems with our new CI lint command. And then you go under tests, and you got the same thing. It'll show this one pass here, which is pretty cool. Go back up to actions. Oh, did I not push that up yet? Let's push that up. We should see this pop up in a second. There we go. And same thing. So we already know that's going to pass because, that's the only thing I changed was the name. And so that's pretty straightforward, right? So let's talk about this jobs thing real quick because this is pretty important. So we have these steps right here. And you'll notice that we have this like checkout code step that we're going to run in this job. And then we're going to do npm CI. And the thing is, this npm run CI lint and npm run CI test, both the lint and the test, ESLint and Jest, are going to require our node modules to be installed, right? So the way that jobs work, if we wanted to make a separate job here, we totally could. We could say, this one could just be tests or something like that. But the problem with that is then I would essentially have to copy all of this down here. I don't know why I'm arrowing everywhere. But I could just kill this line. So I'm still going to have to run, I'm still going to have to do all my standard, like check out the code, do my npm install. And this is the main one. The npm install is what takes a while. So while we would be, I guess I should mention that the thing about jobs is they run asynchronous. And so that's when you would actually use them, is that you want both of these jobs to run at the same time, because maybe one thing is taking too long or the whole suite is taking that long. And a lot of people immediately kind of dive into, from what I've seen, running everything asynchronously so that their tests and their linting can run at the same time. But actually, it won't end up saving you that much time in this instance, and it kind of makes it harder to maintain at this level, because npm install is really what's going to take the bulk of your time right now. And they're both going to have to run that. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to take longer, but it won't be too much time saved for what you're getting here. So in this instance, you probably don't want to use a job, okay? So you might be wondering, when would you want to use a job? I'm going to try and show an example of that in a near future video. But one, quick type of scenario is that right now it's convenient to run these things because, one thing after another has to run, like an npm install. But if you ran, let's say, your tests first or something like that, and they took a really long time to run because you start getting a ton of tests, or let's say you needed to run a build first and the build takes a really long time, that's the situation where you might want to separate them out into jobs, because you could know immediately when one of your jobs fails, like let's say the lint and even just the linting, you want to just run that in its own thing because that's so fast, and it would just flag and tell you immediately. There's a bunch of more complicated scenarios where jobs end up making sense, in my opinion. Jobs being running multiple tasks at the same time, different runners. But for most projects, for me, ones that aren't getting really huge in scale, just doing it all in one job actually lasts me a pretty long time, maybe even all the way through the project, because it just really makes sense to just run them all if they're not going to take that long. So normally I would have shown, the jobs one way or another, because I always like to, make sure that you can see it rather than me just talking through it. But I think that it would probably be more useful if I come up with an example for you to kind of see that the first time. So hopefully that description kind of appeases you for now. So I know this example was pretty basic, but hopefully you're starting to kind of get the groove of how this whole setting up things with GitHub Actions works. And, if you're not, even if you're making multiple jobs, it's not that tricky. But if you're doing it all in this one standard job format, you really just kind of keep adding steps to it as you go. And it's pretty straightforward. You make your one script that you make in your package JSON that does whatever it needs to do. And there you go. So now if someone in a branch changes code that doesn't pass our lint checks or doesn't pass our tests for whatever reason, we're going to see that, be blocked in the PR. It's going to show that fail. And so we get immediate feedback without even having to pull down the code and run the tests ourselves that something ain't right. So that's all for this one. See you next time.